Nigeria is facing one of its worst economic crises in years, which has made millions of Nigerians to struggle with affording basic things as prices have skyrocketed. Since President Bola Tinubu took the oath of office in May 2023, prices of goods and services have been on an upward trend with no signs of stopping. Perhaps one of the greatest miscalculations done by the Nigerian president was announcing the removal of the fuel subsidy, which had been initially pegged at about 250 naira for a litre of fuel. But the first statement Bola Tinubu made after taking the oath of office was announcing the removal of the fuel subsidy, which meant the government no longer had to pay billions to keep the fuel price stable, hence making the fuel price to be determined by demand and supply. This miscalculated announcement caused a ripple effect in the Nigerian economy, as all of a sudden the price of fuel went up to 450 naira for a litre, and over the course of about 8 months the price currently sits at 750 naira for a litre. For a country producing petrol and crude oil, this is worrisome, as the citizens of the country cannot fully comprehend why petrol prices all go up, despite the fact that Nigeria is an oil-producing country. The increase in the price of fuel literally affected every sector of the economy. Prices of goods and services began to double and even triple. Basic commodities and foodstuff like bread, egg, noodles all became too expensive to purchase by the average Nigerian man. Things have become so difficult and so tough that a good number of car owners do not see the need to drive their vehicles when they cannot continue to sustain their cars by purchasing expensive fuel to run their cars. To make matters worse, since Bola Tinubu took over, the naira to the dollar was roughly around 600. However, over the more than a year since he won the elections, the dollar rate to naira has risen from over 600 to 1,500, with some projecting it could get to 2,000 naira for a single dollar. The government has already begun to make efforts to curtail the rise of the naira to the dollar, which so far hasn't been successful. Hence, many are left to wonder, why is this so? Why has the inflation in Nigeria gone up so high, with no plans of ever coming down? In this video, we will take a look at some factors that might have fueled this, which may of course include carelessness by the Nigerian government. As of May 2023, when the new administration took over power in Nigeria, the inflation rate stood at 22.41%. However, just 1 year later, exactly on May 2024, the inflation rate stood at 33.95%. This currently stands at 34.19%. So as you can see, there's just an upward movement of prices of basic goods and services in the country. One of the first reasons I can point out to that began this trajectory of inflation in the country began on the very first day Bola Tinubu took power on May 2023. After being sworn into office and taking the microphone, Bola Tinubu announced that his administration was removing the fuel subsidy, which had been standing for years. This fuel subsidy Bola Tinubu removed was basically a financial assistance provided by the Nigerian government over the years to reduce the cost of fuel for consumers in the country. It is done to keep prices of fuel lower and make it more affordable for the general population. However, one critical mistake Bola Tinubu made while making the announcement proclaiming that the subsidy was removed was not providing enough time for Nigerians to adjust to the sudden change of policy. This meant that after the announcement was made by Tinubu, fuel prices began to soar out of control, and what sold at 250 prior to his announcement sold from 450 naira to 600 naira overnight. This sudden change in the price of fuel and petrol affected other goods and services in the country as prices of foodstuff began to rise as the markets reacted to the careless statement of the president announcing that he has removed the subsidy without providing relief to mitigate the impact of his policy. Critics have said that the Bola Tinubu administration could have chosen from various mechanisms to minimize the negative impact of subsidy removal. As proposed by the World Bank, a temporary price cap would have ensured that fuel price increases did not inflict too much pain on Nigerians. This approach would have enabled the government to significantly reduce but not eliminate the fiscal burden of the subsidy. Another approach Bola Tinubu would have taken is periodic price adjustments, setting the price based on a moving average of previous month's import costs. These adjustments could have been made together with a price cap. The Philippines is one country that successfully removed fuel subsidies in the 90s using the price adjustment mechanism. However, despite Tinubu's carelessness in announcing the removal of subsidies, the subsidies were also considered to be a drain on public finances, costing the government $10 billion in 2022. About 40% of Nigeria's revenue in 2022 was spent on fuel subsidies, which in itself is a lot. Fuel subsidies in Nigeria were notorious for their opacity and graft. Billions of dollars were said to have been lost through corrupt practices in the payment of these subsidies. Another reason why there's an inflation problem in Nigeria has to do with the Tinubu administration's attempts to address the inflation crisis through monetary and fiscal policies, which have so far been largely ineffective. The Central Bank of Nigeria has raised interest rates, but these measures have yet to have a significant impact on consumer prices. Additionally, the government's fiscal policies, including the removal of fuel subsidies, have been criticized for exacerbating the situation rather than providing relief. Experts have argued that the government's inflation targeting policies have lagged effects and typically take time to make a difference to consumer prices. They have also noted that many prices are sticky downward, meaning that they do not come down easily once they have gone up. Truth is that in Nigeria, when prices go up, the chances of it coming down is really low. Looking at the inflation problem from a different perspective, especially considering the Naira-Dollar exchange rate, under the previous leadership of the Central Bank of Nigeria, policymakers tightly controlled the rate of the Naira against the dollar, thereby forcing individuals and businesses in need of dollars to head to the black market, where the currency was trading at a much lower rate. This led to a huge backlog of accumulated foreign exchange demand on the official market, estimating to be $7 billion, due in part to limited dollar flows as foreign investments into Nigeria and the country's sale of crude oil have declined. Tinubu came into power and championed the unified exchange rate, which would mean easier access to the dollar, thereby encouraging foreign investors and stabilizing the Naira. However, despite floating the Naira, that has yet to happen because inflows have been poor. Instead, the Naira has further weakened as it continues to depreciate against the dollar. When Tinubu came into power, the dollar exchanged for the Naira at 700 Naira for a dollar. But as of July 2024, that figure stands at 1,500 Naira for a dollar. Nigerians have reacted strongly against Bola Tinubu's policies, with many groups already talking about planning a peaceful protest to voice out their challenges to the Nigerian government. The painful situation of inflation in the country is at its worst in conflict zones in northern Nigeria, where farming communities are no longer able to cultivate what they eat as they are forced to flee violence. Pockets of protests have broken out in past weeks, but security forces have been quick to impede them, even making arrests in some cases. In the economic hub of Lagos and other major cities, there are fewer cars and more legs on the roads as commuters are forced to trek to work. The prices of everything from food to household items increase daily. The inflation crisis in Nigeria is a major problem that is driven by a combination of factors including fuel price hikes, currency devaluation, supply chain disruptions, and agricultural challenges. Without urgent and comprehensive action to tackle the root causes of inflation, the situation in Nigeria is likely to deteriorate further, with the potential for widespread social unrest and political instability. The government must prioritize measures to stabilize the currency, improve domestic food production, and provide targeted relief to the most vulnerable segments of the population. Failure to do so could have devastating consequences for the country and its people. Thank you for joining us today. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you later.